On behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, I'd like to respond to to that display that was just placed before the people of the state of Oklahoma. I've never before heard the words compromise used so incorrectly in my 11 years at the state capitol. Make no mistake about it, what you heard was a series of inaccuracies that the House Democratic Caucus would like to counter. The first being that we were at all involved in this negotiating process. For the governor to say that she negotiated the budget with us when she came down on the House floor yesterday to watch a cigarette tax fail is a joke. The governor at no point there offered up any real negotiating position. She just came down to say hello. And to say that we met in early February and that somehow constitutes budget negotiations in a bipartisan way is just inaccurate. And so the governor knows better than that. And so that's the first thing. The House Democrats have not been included in this process. The second thing is when the Speaker took the podium today and said somehow 2 out of the 3 tax proposals that were offered up today were from our plan, something that the House Democrats proposed. Make no mistake about it, what you saw today was $400 million worth of tax increases on the backs of middle-class families and an oil and gas gimmick that brings in $0 from the oil and gas industry. None of those ideas, 0 of those ideas, were in our Restoring Oklahoma plan as a standalone measure. We included the cigarette tax in our Restoring Oklahoma plan because that's what the House Republicans wanted, and we told them all along that we would support a cigarette tax increase if and only if they brought gross production tax to the table. And when they've refused to do that, what they offered up today instead was a gasoline tax, which was never our idea, an 18-month giveaway to the oil and gas industry that brings in no money, which was not our idea, and the cigarette tax, which has been their idea from the beginning. Their idea of negotiating is, let's take $400 million for the tax increases on the middle-class families, ask the oil and gas industry, the wealthiest industry in the history of the world, to not offer $1 new to balance a budget next year and somehow call that a compromise. It is inaccurate. And the third inaccuracy was the Speaker of the House today took the podium and said that there's nothing we could do to bring in revenues for the state by increasing gross production taxes. To go to 5% on all currently discounted wells, not going retroactive. He uses the word retroactive as if we're going to go back and make wells that are currently at 2% pay what should have been a 5% rate from a year or 2 ago. We're just talking about setting a new rate as of July 1st. All new wells and all currently discounted wells at 2%. If they went to 5% tomorrow or July 1, it would bring in over $300 million that could be used to balance this budget. And that's why we believe it was a fair, shared solution. What we offered is a solution. Our Restoring Oklahoma plan brings in $1.4 billion. Their plan brings in $400 million. Our Restoring Oklahoma plan shares the burden among wealthy and middle-class families. Their plan only shares the burden on the backs of middle-class families, asking the wealthiest folks in the state to not offer a dime. And so our caucus stands resolute with the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. They did not get into this mess because of tax cuts for middle-class and poor families. They got into this mess because of gross production tax cuts, income tax cuts for the wealthy, and the corporate giveaways that have bankrupted the state. And their plan is not to restore any of those cuts that put us here, but instead to raise taxes on middle-class families. And our caucus, all 26 of us, when they roll out that monstrosity of a middle-class tax hike here today or tomorrow, we will uniformly oppose it because we stand with the citizens of Oklahoma until they come to us with a true negotiating position and offer us a balanced package that shares the burden of balancing this budget among all sectors of society. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You said you're likening this fuel increase to a burden on middle-class families. It's a few dozen dollars a year. I think you said it's like $150 a year or something for a family of 4 or whatever. Mm-hmm. In the scheme of things, that really isn't a whole lot and can be borne by just a fluctuation in gas price. People may not notice it, right?
Well, make no mistake about it, a gas tax increase is a regressive tax increase on middle-class families. We're not in this mess because gas prices are too cheap. We're not in this mess because cigarettes are too cheap. We're in this mess because of $500 million worth of gross production tax cuts for the wealthiest industry on the history of the planet. We're in this mess because of $1.5 billion worth of income tax cuts to wealthy folks, and we're in this mess because of $2 billion for the tax credits and exemptions. You don't make up for those drastic cuts to core services and to our budget bottom line by raising taxes on middle-class families exclusively. And that's the point. We are willing to come to the table and negotiate. We're willing to compromise over tax increases for middle-class families if they will ask the wealthiest in this state who have benefited from those gross production tax cuts over the last decade to pay their fair share. And to date, they're not. And it was evident. The governor even mentioned in her own comments that what she's asking the oil and gas industry to do tomorrow or next year is to not offer $1 new than what they're currently paying this year. That is not a fair solution. $400 million from the pockets of middle-class families and $0 new from the pockets of Harold Hamm is unconscionable to my caucus.
Leader Inman, can you speak to the issue of log rolling? I mean, if they they put these two revenue-raising measures in one bill, is it log rolling and will it get challenged?
You know, I appreciate that question, Barbara, because the speaker said that to change the rate from 2% to 5% on all currently existing wells was unconstitutional. I'm the attorney, he's the banker, so I'll trust him with investments, I'll trust myself when it comes to the Constitution. It is not unconstitutional to change the current tax rate for any well or any person for that matter from 2% to 5% next year. To say that it is unconstitutional is patently wrong, but to turn around and say that we can lump in a cigarette tax, a gas tax, and oil and gas credits all into one bill, which have multiple subjects, that is unconstitutional. We believe not only will it not pass muster, but if they pass it in that form, which it won't because our caucus won't support it, but if it were to go into law and the Supreme Court strike it down, it would blow a $400 million hole in the budget.
What about the $1,000 teacher pay raise funded through the internet streaming tax? Could your caucus get on board with that?
So we've said all along that the way you fund teacher pay raises is by restoring the gross production tax cuts, restoring income tax cuts on high earners, then supporting a cigarette tax and a variety of other measures. The plan that they've got by making people pay taxes on Netflix and cable services to fund a teacher pay raise just is a non-starter. And I'll be very honest with you, Senate Republicans have said all along that they don't believe with a $900 or a $1.1 billion budget hole that we could afford a teacher pay raise. The House Republicans didn't support a gas tax. Now all of a sudden they're somehow singing Kumbaya. The reason they're all singing Kumbaya isn't because Senate Republicans support a teacher pay raise this year. They don't. Isn't because House Republicans support a gas tax this year. They don't. It's just because they want to play gimmicks and try to blame House Democrats for not balancing a budget when they have been the ones who've refused to negotiate in good faith with our caucus. They're the ones that have only offered up middle-class tax hikes without asking the wealthiest in the state to pay their fair share.
It sounded like a special session, do you think?
I think we're absolutely headed to a special session, and that's because of gimmicks like today. If they wanted to avoid a special session, they would have brought me into the negotiating room on behalf of my caucus, and we would have worked out a deal around gross production taxes that shared the burden, that asked the oil and gas industry to pay more than what they paid this year to balance this budget. They didn't do that. They excluded my caucus and Senate Minority Leader John Sparks from the negotiations because they knew that what they wanted to do at the end of the day was to try to shame us into voting for cigarette tax and gas tax increases on middle-class families. And I promise you, they cannot embarrass or shame my caucus into voting for tax hikes on middle-class families while they give oil and gas companies a break.
Do you think that the reduction from 36 to 18 months is a signal that your strategy is working?
Absolutely. We believe the fact that they're even talking about a gross production tax when for the last 4 months they've said gross production tax is off the table is a good sign. And so we're asking the citizens of Oklahoma to not give up. Please contact your state representative, contact your state senator, contact the governor's office and tell them it's time to go to 5%, time to go to 7% on gross production taxes to bring in that revenue. They said it was off the table for months. They're moving now. They're moving because they know at the end of the day the public is with us. In a bipartisan manner, the public is with us. We've won the battle. The vast majority of the oil and gas industry in the state of Oklahoma is with us on this issue, and it's time for the House Speaker and the Governor and the Pro Tem to get on board.
Do you have comments on the Speaker's words in saying that he would bring some of those bills that came out of JCAP yesterday evening that would have been changes to taxation policy, not revenue-raising measures? Is that a threat?
I mean, the fact that what they've offered up to bring in terms of revenue to the state is a gas tax increase on middle-class families, a cigarette tax increase on middle-class families, making families who give their car to their 16-year-old pay excise taxes on it, eliminating the back-to-school sales tax holiday for our working families, making state agencies have to pay sales tax with money that they rarely have. Those are their gimmicks. Their plans are to hurt middle-class families and allow their wealthiest corporate donors to get off scot-free. Our caucus refuses to be complicit in this tax shifting from the wealthiest folks who can afford to fund these services to the poorest folks who can't. Thank you all very much.